Namaste, India. Welcome to the show. She speaks at 10. Every woman has a story. I've been asked to share some thoughts with you all about my life and my thoughts and my story, so to speak. And I'll try to do that in the time we have. I'm grateful to Aambra Foundation and in particular to Vinita Sharma Bakshi to have provided me with this opportunity um, and the forum to put these thoughts to you. So just about me, my name is Geeta Chaudhary, and I'm a psychiatrist by trade, currently based in Australia. I come from India, where I've lived for first 25, 28 years of my life till I moved overseas. And it is still very much a part of my DNA, who I am, how I see myself. Um, and above that, I think there are probably many contradictions, but that's how we are if we see ourselves as individuals. And I'm thinking of where to start and what to share with you today. So I might start with some personal stories and how I came to be involved with this group. I met Vinita Sharma Bakshi a few years ago, connected with her online at first, and over the years have come to know of the wide-ranging work she does and the interest she has. And I think it's the common causes that connected us, besides the common interests we share in music, literature, poetry. Um, and I think just as human beings, how we bond with each other. So it's been wonderful. And through Vinita, I've come to know many other people. But I'm really thrilled about the work she does through her Aambra Foundation for the betterment of society and particularly helping women and the disadvantaged, because these are the very causes that are very close to my heart and have always been. Um, and in telling my story about my life and whatever I share with you, I think that those things feature very widely and kind of provide a canvas, I suppose, on which you take steps, you get stronger, you become more resilient, and you do more things, and then you take more people along with you, and you try and share that with other people and share that compassion and understanding with others. So I was born in India um, in a middle class family. I was third of five siblings with a couple of older sisters and a couple of younger brothers. That put me in a very unique position more than 5 decades ago uh, in terms of how I came to view myself through the growing up years. And I think it is probably important to say that I saw myself as hard to, I found it hard to fit in to a great extent, fit into the mold right from the start. And probably there was a streak for not necessarily rebellion, but a tendency to question the givens, um, tendency to ask questions, why, or why me, why not me, and all those sort of things. Um, and one of the things I was very aware of from a very young age was being a girl. And I really saw it as a huge disadvantage in many ways. Perhaps a take on what I saw was going on in the world around me. And this is a perception as a child, not as an adult. I guess I've come to review and revise my views over the years. But certainly in India of those days, there was a huge difference in terms of desirability of a girl child and a male child. Um, and I somehow felt it through those early years that I was treated differently as a girl child. Having said that, I think within family, within home, I can't complain. I think I've always got what I wanted most of the time. And I was not treated particularly differently to the privileges my brothers had. And perhaps I was more privileged than my older sisters in some ways. Um, but there was, I guess we live in a wider society, and there are implications of that in how families view what you're doing. Something as simple as, you know, that gets prefaced with, you're a girl, you shouldn't be doing that, can have a huge impact and meaning in terms of how you see yourself. Um, and I think in particular, I felt also that being a girl was became a bigger part than me being a person or an individual at times. And I found that really difficult. And to me, boys, girls, everyone was an individual with an identity, and I related to them as individuals. So it was a bit disconcerting when there is, I guess, problems with that you're going out, or you're going to out for so long, or staying out with this person or that person. Um, it never made sense to me, to be honest. Being a girl, I think the other big awakening, or not necessarily awakening, but a realization that there's something I don't like about this, um, is when I hit puberty. That was probably a second coming of the sense of, why is being a girl so hard? Um, and this is, I guess, again, in terms of how girls are seen in society, how women are objectified, um, how you get teased and groped. And, as a 12, 13-year old, having those things happen to me, uh, it's really shocking. You kind of just don't even know how to react. And before you can react, the person has gone or walked past, or, drove away. And it, it's just very demeaning to have those experiences. Um, it's not that it doesn't happen elsewhere in the world, those sort of things. But I think, the way society functions, what thoughts and ideas are repressed, um, and where people take that out probably forms a part of the landscape. Anyway, other bits of my story, rather. So I did my schooling back in India, changed through a few different schools, did pretty good, enjoyed being at school, because that was one area where you could um, kind of just focus on what you had to do and excel at that and not have to worry about other bits. So primary school was pretty good. And through the high school, I think I went through usual journeys most adolescents go in finding out who I am, what I'm interested in, what do I want to be, what kind of person I'm going to be. And it was an interesting phase of life. I suppose it probably is for most adolescents. That involves a lot of emotional turmoil, intense emotions, the importance relationships, friendships take on in that time. Um, and schooling just went along and you just did it, and you passed and you went to the next year, and that's how it was. I think, again, school was a very mixed bag of an experience, but I have to say, uh, my experiences with my teachers were really, really positive most of the time. Um, and they probably go a long, long way in terms of shaping me who I am, apart from my immediate family. Um, those years probably helped me to develop a sense of self, be more confident in my own skin, who I was, not have to complain about what was not wrong, what was wrong with the world, but kind of see what was right with me, and focus on that. Um, I did have a couple of disconcerting experiences, um, uh, in that kind of stood out for me. They probably weren't huge issues, but I think the way, as a teenager, I took them, they had a significant impact on me. Um, I was very interested in reading, writing from a young age. I devoured books. I guess when I was in high school, I read a lot of books that probably older people of older age than I was read. Um, and that had a very mixed sort of reaction from adults at times. I felt put down at times, in terms of reading certain things, and even for writing down some things that inadvertently a teacher found. And looking back, I don't think I wrote anything wrong or anything to be um, feeling bad or ashamed about, but I was made to stand out like a sore thumb, in that you write a journal as if writing a journal was the biggest sin. I think it's one of the healthiest things you can do, to be honest. And I would really um, tell people to consider that in their life. Not so much for anyone else, but for yourself. It provides a great opportunity for reflection. I can go through some of the things I wrote 20 years ago and get a deeper understanding of who I was then, and even an understanding of how I interpreted things and what the context was. Um, so anyway, I will leave it at that. But talking of work and career, I completed my schooling. I did go on to complete my medical studies in Delhi, and then decided that I needed to study further. That's something that has kind of stuck with me over the years. The more I know, I feel, oh, I need to know more. This is not enough. And I think I'm still studying in some ways. But the college years were fun in many ways. I enjoyed a lot of things. I detested a few things. I was again not your um, stock standard medical student in terms of um, uh, in terms of focus or interest in particular things. Um, and somewhere along the way, I became very interested in the mysteries of our mind and the connections between our body and the brain, um, and the mind. And when it came to time and I had to specialize, I decided to specialize in psychiatry. Uh, um, it wasn't a welcome decision from many others' perspective, as I recall. And as I said, we're talking about 25, 30 years ago. So um, it, at that time, certainly mental illness equated to being a lunatic, to be honest. And the portrayal we have, for example, in the mainstream media, in films, is that people with intellectual disabilities, people with mental illness, they're kind of people you laughed at and that you found funny, or they were crazy, in that sense. Um, there was very little out there then that gave people, general public, any understanding of what mental illness really looked like, who these human beings were besides their diagnosis. Um, and it just, it fascinated me. So anyway, I did initially 6 months, as we called in those days, a house job, or what you do after internship. And I got hooked, so to speak. So I did my MD, again in Delhi at AIIMS, and moved overseas after a few years of that, and have gone on to do further studies. So I trained as a psychiatrist with MD, and then I've obtained my qualifications here in Australia. I work as a specialist child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'm also trained as a psychotherapist. Um, and it's not so much about collecting qualifications from my point of view, because I really don't do anything different in terms of the job, but it's about getting a better and deeper understanding of what is going on. And of course, you gain skills and you use them. Um, so I think choosing that subject as something to study and later on to embark on that career has been a big part of my life and story, and one that brings me a great lot of satisfaction, um, and is always fulfilling in every minute of the work I do. Um, and over the years, I've worked in different setups. So I worked in India, of course. I worked for a period of time in England, and I worked in Australia. I spent a period of time, my life in another country where um, I had a different sort of experience, in that because I'd moved overseas, I did not really practice as a doctor till I got my letters. And in that time, I did some very interesting things that probably, if you're just a doctor, you don't end up doing to the extent or having that exposure. So I worked in a rehabilitation program for youth, drugs, and alcohol, and uh, it was a residential program, and we used to run a lot of groups and family therapy, and it was really fascinating and interesting, and that's what made me want to study further in terms of specializing in child and adolescent mental health. Um, I also spent more than a year working with an organization at the time, which was really new and qualifies as probably migrant women's association sort of a thing. But a lot of work they did, and initially I joined them as a volunteer, and then I provided some formal counseling through them, and later on joined their executive. And it was an organization that was budding and probably mainly focused on domestic violence among women in migrant communities. It is an interesting experience. It's more than interesting. I think it is, I don't really have the words, but it opens your eyes to a number of things. And through that process of working with women, the stresses that they operate under, the new migrants, as well as sometimes people who had been in the country for years altogether, the children, the complications that come with that legal side. So I did that, and we established the first Asian women's refuge at that time in the country there. And it was a very fulfilling experience to be able to provide that sort of a service. Obviously, it's not the be all or end all, but to begin with, just to be able to escape from an abusive situation, and having people to support, help, listen, work through the practical matters. That's a very first step for a lot of people. So I did that there. And as I said, I have worked as a psychiatrist, and I like every aspect of it, except for the paperwork sometimes that goes in the job. And I hate bureaucracy, because that seems to just make things difficult to do and achieve sometimes. And I think talking about mental health, what do I want to say? The reality is there's a huge stigma to mental health, not just in India, all the world over. We are getting better. There's greater awareness. There's more information out there. But still, I think we have a long, long way to go in really treating people more than their diagnosis, more than their illnesses. And we also have a long way to go to accept that this can happen to any of us. I think that is sadly lacking in most of the people I come across. How common it is, you would not believe. Everyone I talk to, every person I know, has approached me at some or the other time to talk about someone else or something that they were concerned about for another person. And sometimes those people know each other, but they would not have talked to each other. Some illnesses are very common. They're very high prevalence illnesses, anxiety, depression. You probably have someone in your life already who is suffering from these problems. But even other illnesses, they're not, in terms of difficulties people have around adjustments relating to the diagnosis they have, the medications they take, the work environment adjustments. There is a whole range of things that is really required as far as acceptance is concerned, as far as providing opportunities is concerned, as far as providing supports is concerned. And I would also like to say that apart from that acceptance, getting help early is probably really, really important. And one of the things I love about working with children and adolescents is that you get that opportunity to strike in early, to make a change, to do something different, to change the course of things. Not that you don't do that with adults, you're always trying, but in terms of illness or consequences of the illness impacting on your functioning, impacting on your day-to-day life, impacting on your development. Um, that can be really addressed if there's a early intervention. Working together is probably the other thing that I really think is important. Not working in silos. And as a psychiatrist, I'm big on what we called biopsychosocial assessments and interventions, which means involving carers, families, parents, husbands, spouses. Of course, keeping in mind the confidentiality and privacy and all those things. But they are the support system for people. And it is important that they understand the needs of my patient and are able to support them in their journey. And it's really important to work with, say, schools, teachers, for them to understand what's happening, how things are impacting on the child, and other professionals that may be working with the young person, what work they're doing, how the patient is responding to it. So that's another bit, I suppose. I think I've talked enough about psychiatry. I should probably talk about some couple of other things, just in terms of personal life. And so I have a son who's now 18 years old. I have a dog that I got 4 years ago, who is my second child, and who has given me that lease of life and excitement and enjoyment that I seemed to be losing a few years ago. It's been really great. I was married once. I'm divorced for quite a few years. I've chosen to remain single at this point in time. I suppose that's the way to put it. I just enjoy being on my own and being my own person so much, I suppose, that I've not yet found any reason to change that. I would like to make more time for a number of things that I have probably been putting aside for a long time. And I think that's something I would have found very hard to understand. And that's something I would like, I suppose you could take it as a message that there's no right time for things. You do things when you can make time, and you shouldn't put off things for a later day. Time just passes. We all make practical decisions. I've got to run a house, I've got to pay the mortgage, I've got to put the food on the table and all that stuff, so I've got to work. So I've kept up with some interest, but there are a lot of things that I would like to explore further. I love travel, and I've been doing that for years and always enjoyed it. It's such an enriching experience, not just about seeing places, but people and their viewpoints, their life and their experiences. There is difference, and then there's a common thread that binds us all. And I think noting that is really important. I think to try and put yourself in the shoes of another person, um, to be able to show compassion and kindness rather than get drawn into jealousy, envy, anger. I think you allow for your um, own betterment and personal growth, and you probably help people along the way. Um, I would like to say that I would like to pursue some other interests. Very keen to take up art and painting at some stage, and travel more than what I have. Um, I'm very close to nature. It really gives me a lease of life. Um, and I wouldn't even have noticed it 15, 20 years ago. I don't know. I just feel I've created that space where I have the ability to enjoy a lot of things for myself. The journey still goes on. I'm sure there's lots more to do and lots more to um, understand, lots more to learn about myself. Maybe along the way, I'll take some people professionally, personally, um, for whom I can make a difference. And that's the whole idea of, I guess, existence. We are social beings. And much as I like to be an individual, I never forget that. I think I'll stop here. I would like to give a shout out to Vanita Bakshi once again for giving me this platform to talk to you, to put some thoughts across. As I was saying, I don't really believe in preaching, but I'm a great believer in that we can sometimes observe and learn. And we learn a lot of things incidentally, and sometimes that learning and knowledge can go a long way in shaping us and our lives. Thank you very much once again to Aambra Foundation. And I hope this has worked.